Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. So, today I am starting day 3 of our Spiritual Awakening RGV community launch party. So, I am Janie Santoy of Sybil Now, which is Create Your Best Life Now. And so, today, what I want to do is I want to start out our conversation by talking about spiritual tools, and one of the that come from the shamanic tradition. So and about guides, because that's part of the tools that we can use from the shamanic tradition, but then I'll be expanding more on other types of guides that we can work with. So I welcome any of your questions, so feel free to ask any questions that you may have about guides in general or connecting to guides. I'll kind of be giving you an overview of my understanding and how I've been working with my spirit guides, and the benefit that I've gotten from that through this journey that I've been on. So now later on today, so our second talk today is about astrology. So tune in for that. So Anais Sullivan is going to be joining us to talk about her own journey and how she uses astrology. And I might even sneak in some questions regarding body movement because she does practice yoga as well. And then later, we're going to wrap up the launch party with a conversation with Joe Villarreal, who is going to be here talking about ayahuasca and his experience with ayahuasca, how he has used it in his own journey, and his plan to bring the plant medicine to the valley. So we'll hear all about that today. So I want to jump in and start talking about spirit guides. Now, I know that a lot of people start their spiritual journey and then start working with meditation. And sometimes when you go into meditation, then you start receiving messages, or you start seeing things, you start experiencing things, and you're not exactly sure what they are. And so my understanding, and depending on where you are on your path, is that a lot of those are messages, and it's actually your guides communicating with you. So now, how can you understand this whole concept of guides? So one of the things I think that we have to first come to terms with, or we have to kind of change our paradigm to think that we're all connected, right? And that there is something beyond us at the third dimension. So I think if you're in the group, then you probably already have made that paradigm shift. But it's actually a huge paradigm shift. So it's actually taking you from a 3D life, right, to a more 5D life. And sometimes that transition can be rough. It can be rough because now we're questioning everything that we have learned throughout our lives and what we've been taught, and we don't understand, or we don't know how to deal with what's coming in because people don't talk about it, or you may not be in communities that talk about it openly. And if you start sharing your experiences with people in your life that are still very much in the 3D life, then they're not going to be very empathetic, right? They may not be supportive in that transition that you are undergoing. But so part of that is really understanding kind of the language of 5D, kind of understanding the language of connection. And because however you understand what the guides are, so you can think of your guides as angels, right? If you come from that particular tradition, you can think of your guides as animal guides, for example, and that comes more from an earth-based tradition. So a shamanic tradition would, that's part of what shows up are animals. And sometimes in our lifetime, we have already been connected to a certain animal and we don't understand why we have this particular affinity to that animal. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But sometimes the guides can come in from other traditions. So they can be gods and goddesses from other cultures that you felt this affinity for, let's say throughout your lifetime. So if you studied the Greek gods, right? If you studied Egyptian gods, if you studied, let's say, Aztec gods. So it depends on what your experience has been and what's been showing up for you. And part of it is being open to what has shown up and what is calling you to make that connection. So just because, let's say, I can connect with owl, for example, doesn't mean that that particular spirit animal is going to, or that particular energy is going to resonate with you. So one is really being open to, well, what is resonating with you, right? So after you've made that shift to 5D consciousness and really understanding that we're all connected, right? And that really the divine energies want us to succeed. So one of the reasons why we are here is to experience life, 3D life. But I'm convinced that it doesn't necessarily mean that we're here to experience hardship and pain in the way that we understand it. Like we're here to suffer and then we die, right? That's a very 3D mentality. Not to say that we aren't going to experience pain or we aren't going to experience suffering, but we can move through that and we can seek help to help us move through that. And guides are one way to do it. Now, there's several things that get in the way, of course, when we are first trying to kind of establish contact with our guides. And so one of those is self-doubt, right? So if you we either self-doubt in I'm not going to be able to do it, I have no idea what's going on, or self-doubt in terms of I'm just making it up, right? This is just my imagination. But if you understand that our experience kind of in the spirit realm is through our imagination, right? Is through this kind of elevated consciousness that kind of feels like our imagination, then you want to kind of collapse that expectation or that sense of frustration or that sense of self-judgment on yourself. And so that's really going to help you to open up. So, and I want to thank Hugo and Sheuli who are here watching. Thank you for joining in. And if you have any questions on this particular topic, or if you want to share your own experiences with the spirit guides, if you already connect with them, then I'd love to see them in the comments. So continuing, so I'm going to kind of start with shamanic practice, because I think that is something that calls a lot of people, and you may not necessarily understand it. So one of the ways that I was called a long time ago was through my connection with curanderas in my lifetime. And especially here living in South Texas and part of, I have Mexican ancestry, that is part of the culture. But of course, that culture was lost when my parents immigrated, because we didn't have that connection, or I didn't have that connection to the grandmothers who had that knowledge, right? Who had that knowing about plants and using curanderismo to help the community. Now, I know that they did, right? Because I was talking to my parents, but they lived in Mexico. So I didn't really grow up with that connection. So when I was growing up and this was calling to me, I didn't really understand why, right? And one of the things that I did feel was that I felt sad that the tradition was being lost. It's like it wasn't passed on to me. It wasn't passed on to people that I know. Kind of maybe traditions that my mom used to do. So when she would, let's say, give us some teas, right? Or she would rub us with the egg when for mal de ojo. But they were few and far between, and there was no coherent understanding of what things meant. Like, why did they work? What was the underlying theories behind why things worked. And for me, that's always been important to understand why something works. So So, but it always called to me, but I didn't understand. So there was these kind of earth-based type practices that were lost through the generations because of immigration. So for me, there was this desire to reconnect, but I wasn't sure where to reconnect. So I wasn't sure who to work with, who to or how. I didn't even know that people taught this, right? I didn't know that this was something that you could learn. I just thought that, oh, well, it's passed on. And once that knowledge is lost, then it's lost, right? And we just have to focus on science and whatever it is that is kind of prominent in whatever culture we are in. But as I grew older, and then as I had more time, and of course, as I became a little bit more desperate in my life for guidance and answers, these other knowings started coming into my life. And so one time I worked with a healer, and the healer recommended that I listen to music and that I listened to sounds. And she recommended that I explore different sounds to see what resonated, because I really needed to have that as part of my healing process. Now, so she gave me a lot of different examples of things that I could listen to, and I could dive deeper to whatever resonated. So what ended up resonating with me was drumming. So I don't know if you have ever heard drumming or if you have ever experienced it in a drumming circle, but when I heard drumming for the first time, there was this knowing and this connection with that I could not explain. And I had never heard it before. I had never I had heard the drums before. I mean, of course we have, if you've heard music, but I had never heard shamanic drumming before, and I had never heard it in that way. And there was just this connection, and that drew me into the world of shamanic practice. And so I started reading about shamanic practice. I started listening to a bunch of podcasts and reading books and reading websites, and really I started following some teachers that I resonated with, and again a deeper understanding of what the connection that I had felt that I had lost early on in my life, and with curanderismo. And so, but it was coming into my life through shamanic practice. And shamanic practice and curanderismo really are very tied together, only that, of course, it has a different name. And so I was called to dive deeper. So I didn't know any curanderas who were actually teachers. I knew curanderas here in town and in the valley who do the work, right? So if you have some ailment, then you go to a curandera for the work. But one of the things that I knew and that I had problems with is that people don't talk about it. People don't, when they go see a curandera or a healer, like it's kind of under the table, and these people exist. They're part of our community, and we find out about them through word of mouth. They really don't advertise, right? They don't talk about their own traditions. They may take on mentees, but how does that actually happen? Like, I had no idea, right? So to me, that world was not open because I did not have a clear familial connection with somebody who was a curandera. And so I searched for these tools outside, and I started learning about shamanic practice with a teacher who is from Portland. And so I started studying with her, and I started, so first I listened to a lot of her work and read a lot of books on the practice. But then I wanted to really understand and be able to do the practice myself. So how do I do this? And what is that understanding of, that underlies these practices? And so I really delve into that. And so that's kind of a little bit of what I want to share with you, because all of this was so new, and I it was a real paradigm shift for me to be able to work in this way. And so one of the things about shamanic practice that I love is that it incorporates the 3 levels that I've been talking about all weekend, which is awareness, healing, and aligned action. So you can use the shamanic tools to gain awareness about what's happening in your life and to really connect with spirits who can help you understand what's going on. They can also help you to heal. So they can do you can do healing journeys, and then they can also give you practices that can help you to heal. And they can also guide you in terms of what you can do in your life and how you can take that action to actually create the changes that are going to be beneficial for you. So these are one of the some of the reasons why I love shamanic practice, because they really incorporate everything. So once I had been kind of on my path for a while. For example, I became a Reiki master, but for me, a Reiki was more about the healing aspect and not so much about awareness, about understanding what's going on, and less so about aligned action. Like, what do I do now, right? So I just got a Reiki session and I feel great, but like, why did I feel bad in the first place? And then what do I do after this to maintain this high energy? And so what I found with shamanic practice is that it actually incorporated everything that I was looking for versus only one dimension of it. So that was really important and very powerful for me. And so the main thing that drew me to shamanic practice was the fact that it is a method of direct revelation. What that means is that you don't need an intermediary. Right. So when we are raised in the Catholic Church, and I was as a lot of people who have been raised here in South Texas and other parts of the world have been as well. There's this concept of needing, right, to have someone who can connect you to the divine, and that there's always some intermediary that is that you have to go through to connect. And then there's a lot of things. There's kind of a lot of what's the word that I'm looking for? There's a lot of requirements that you have to do. So there's a sense that things are conditional. But for shamanic practice, there isn't, right? There's just tools, there's practices, and it's about engaging with them and then working with them to really develop your own practice and your own understanding and your own strength with the tools, because it's like any tool. When you start using it, you may not necessarily know how to handle it, but the more you use it, the more practice you get, then the stronger you get with that tool, the more adept, and then you become an expert at it. So that's one of the things that I learned. And so with shamanic practice, you do journeying. And so journeying, basically it's like meditation, but it's a lot more active. And versus just trying to sink in and then just trying to kind of quiet the mind and then seeing what comes up, journeying is a practice that you do that's very intentional, and that has some, like, a structure to it that you can follow. So you can start with some guided journeys and then understand what that structure is that you're following. And then, of course, go with an intention. So what is it that you want out of the journey? So you can either go take a journey in order to understand something and gain a deeper awareness of it, why it's happening, or what the causes are, what the results would be. Very similar to the way I talked about the Akashic Records, and which is why I connect so much to the Akashic Records, is because I think journeying and going into the Akashic Records are basically the same thing, only that we are understanding them through different traditions. So you can take a journey, and you can also take a journey to do a healing journey, because you want to heal something, whether it's emotional, whether it's psychic, it can even be physical. And then, of course, you can take a journey to ask about guidance as to what you should do, what action you should take. So journeying is a fundamental part of the shamanic practice. So when you journey, you can journey into 3 different dimensions. So you can journey to what's called the lower world, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. You can journey to the middle world, and then you can journey to the upper world. So the lower world is the earth, basically, is where you can connect with the roots, you can connect with the soil, you can connect with water, you can journey underwater. A lot of people bring in our Catholic tradition, or kind of our understanding of the lower being hell. Well, that's not this at all, right? So we don't want to mix traditions. Because remember that shamanic practice comes from an earth-based practice. So an earth-based practice really doesn't believe in hell, right? So if we think of the earth, what's at the center of the earth? Well, the core, right, which is molten and it's metal. And the deeper you go, then there are several layers. There's water, there's rock, right? But there's the understanding of hell. It comes from a Christian tradition, so we don't want to bring that in. So when you are journeying to the lower world, you connect with, for example, animals that are very much connected to the earth. You can go into a cave, right? And so why would somebody want to journey into the lower world? Well, because the lower world is where you can connect to the wisdom of the earth. Then the middle world is basically our world here. So if I wanted to, let's say, to take a trip to, or take a journey to Central Park in New York City, that would be the middle world, right? Because it's right here where we are living. So if I wanted to understand about something related to my job, I could do a journey here in the middle world. And then the upper world is where you journey into the clouds, you journey into the sky, you journey up above with celestial beings and angels, for example, right? So you can think of the lower world and middle world and upper world as all levels that we understand here on earth, right? So the earth would be the lower world, the middle world would be here, the ground that we walk on, and then the upper world would be anything that's above. So when you rise up, let's say above the treetops and into the atmosphere, then into space, so all of that would be the upper world. So you can take these journeys, and so different parts, different worlds are going to teach you different things. Now, sometimes you may be asking, well, do I always need to know where I'm going? And no, you don't, right? So you can connect with a guide, and the guide can take you where you need to go depending on what your intention is. So your guide can be an animal. Your guide can be an angel. You can really, it's up to you to journey to find who your guide is that can help you with that particular journey, and then trust that however they appear to you is what most resonates with you at the time. So for example, for a lot of people, first they're uncomfortable, let's say, connecting with animals, and so they want to connect to more like humanoid type beings that look more like humans or take a human shape, or an angel, for example. And of course you can do that. But with shamanic practice, a lot of it is really understanding that the earth has a lot of energies that we can tap into, and that we can connect with, and that we can benefit from, that we can learn from. So for example, and I think I talked about this before, so one of my guides that I work with is Owl. And so when does Owl show up? Well, Owl shows up for me when I need to see in the dark, right? When I need to be able to go in and get a higher perspective on something. And so usually I know that if I'm kind of stuck in the mud with a particular issue or a particular question that I have, so then I can intentionally call Owl. But I remember the first time that Owl appeared to me, that's what happened. Like I had this question, I really wasn't seeing options. And so then I connected with Owl, and so Owl just showed up. I just asked for a guide that could help me with this. Owl showed up and took me flying, and then I was able to get a bigger perspective and see wider, so kind of a higher perspective, and see ramifications of the questions and things that I wasn't considering. And so all of this through the connection with this particular guide. There's other times when I have journeyed and other types of guides have shown up. Sometimes they're just energies that I feel. I don't necessarily see someone. Sometimes it's a human that feels almost ancestral. It feels like I have a familial connection with that particular guide. And so that's another way that you can connect with, in shamanic practice, is you can connect with your ancestors who can be beneficial, right? And so what would be the difference between, let's say, connecting with an animal spirit versus connecting with an ancestor? Well, one of the reasons that you would want to connect with an ancestor is because the ancestor has been human, right? So the ancestor knows about human issues. The ancestor knows about kind of the problems and the desires that we have in this human lifetime, versus an animal doesn't necessarily have that particular knowledge, right? So when we want a guide who can really resonate and understand what it is that we're going through, a lot of times an ancestor will be more beneficial because they have lived that human experience before. So if you want to work with ancestors, it is really important that you always call ancestors that lived and died well. So that is one of the phrases that my shamanic teacher uses. And the reason why is because there are a lot of people in our ancestral lines who did not live and die well. So we do not want guidance from them, right? So if there were somebody who was always in debt, always getting in trouble, always fighting with people, and if we ask whoever to show up, well, they're probably going to give us guidance that's coming from that particular perspective, and it's not going to be very beneficial for us, right? So that's why it's so important when we're going to connect that you always set an intention, and your intention really guides and sets the parameters for the energies that you are calling in. So whereas you can just open yourself up and call anyone, right, or call anyone to come help, well, that may not necessarily be the safest thing to do. So what you do want to do is to call somebody of high vibration, right? To call someone who's going to help you on your path, somebody who is going to bring you beneficial energies, somebody who's going to help you to understand. And of course, and the ancestors who lived and died well, then that means that they were good people. And if there are ancestors and we connect with their energies, that means that they're going to want good things for us, just like we want good things for our children or our grandchildren or our family, right? We don't want bad things to happen to them. So that's the same thing that will happen when you connect with ancestors. So you may be asking, okay, so how do I do this? Well, there are other books that you can read kind of to get more specific guidance. There are YouTube videos. You can always search on YouTube to connect. But one of the things that I have learned is if you can find a group, especially with shamanic journeying, that if you can find a group that where people connect and where you journey together, then that way you can share your experiences. And one of the things that happens, especially when you first start connecting with your guides, like I said before, is doubt. And you really doubt comes in, and the whole sense of, is this, am I making it up? And sometimes when you see something that may be a little scary, and the reason why it's scary is because you really don't understand what is going on. So, for example, when you connect with animals, when you take a journey and you connect with an animal and you ask for healing, a lot of times what the animal is going to do, and I've experienced this myself, is the animal is going to poke at you, right? The animal is, if you have a pain in your stomach, for example, the animal may go in and poke in your stomach. Now, all of my experiences have been, of course, I mean, it doesn't hurt, but it's strange when especially if you're very visual, like if you see this in your mind's eye, right? Or if you feel like they're in there kind of rummaging. But if you're asking for this thing to be healed and you ask for a power animal or an animal guide to come and heal you, then that's part of what they may do, right? And so just being ready and understanding that may happen, then you won't be freaked out by it. And a lot of times when you journey with a group of people, then you will kind of share with each other what your experiences were, so that then you can understand what could potentially happen in a journey. So it kind of opens up your awareness for the possibilities of what can happen and the types of experiences that you can have. So for example, if you're journeying with 5 other people and you had one particular experience with your own journey, but then when you share, you're able to hear what 4 other people experienced in their journeys, then that widens your awareness, right? That widens the possibilities that you have available for you for guidance and for healing. So if you can find a group, and even if you just go to that group periodically, you don't necessarily need to go all the time, but it's so good to have that community, especially when you're entering a tradition that is completely new to you, so that you can have other people to talk about it with. So book learning is good, right? And learning with videos is good. But ultimately, when you're on this path, you do want to find a community with whom you can share your experiences. And one of the things that I have found is that my path has kind of accelerated exponentially once I connect, right? Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to form this group. Like, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come in and share, is because the path can get lonely. The path can get lonely when you have questions, when there's a lot of turmoil and you don't know. A lot of times when we are experiencing something that's difficult, we can't see the way out, right? And so we don't know what would help. And if we don't have anybody to reach out for help to, then that makes it even more difficult. So really having a community in which you can practice, and then you can share your practices, and then you can share the journey, is so very important. So this is a little bit. So Ugo, thank you. So you're saying that I made this weekend a great journey. So thank you for saying that. I really. And in fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday that I said, what on earth compelled me to commit to doing 3 hours of talks for 3 days in a row when I'm supposed to be on vacation? But something just called me to do this, and because I had time and I knew I was going to have the energy, and this year is ending and we're starting a brand new decade. So I thought, what better way to end the year than to start forming a community that I hope will grow, and then you guys will make connections with each other. I know that we live throughout the valley, but I'm hoping that we can find a place. So I live in Brownsville, and I do travel up to McAllen to the Infinite Love, and so you guys heard Vic Shivdasani talking about Infinite Love. That's a great center there. So if you live close to McAllen, that you can join, and I hope to be able to be leading some sessions over there. But again, it's an hour away from me, right? So it's a 2-hour round trip. So I can't go every single day, or I'm committed to going at least once a week. But I'm hoping that we can find a space in other places here in the Valley, and that people will step up to start these circles. And so one of the things that I do want to do is to really share shamanic practice and Akashic Records work, because that is something that really calls me and has been so beneficial in my own journey. So if you have any other questions, feel free to ask them here on this video, post them in the group. So if you haven't joined the group, I encourage you to join the group. There should be a link somewhere on this video. So I think I posted the link. If not, I'll go in and post it again. But it's all over my page. So if you look through the page, then you'll find the group. So join the group, and then we'll be sharing a lot more there. Again, the group is there so that we can feel safe, right? So that we can have these conversations in a way that where we know that the people that are in the group will be open to talk about this. And as you've seen, that there's different people in the Valley that we're going through the same journey and of awakening, and we're looking for support. And it's always, sometimes we need it more than others, but reach out if you have questions, if something resonates and you want to learn more. And of course, if you want to make connections with other people in the group, then do reach out. So I will be back later talking with Anais Sullivan, and we're going to be talking about astrology and how we can use astrology in our spiritual journey. And then we'll end the weekend by talking with Joe Villarreal, who is going to be talking to us about his journey with the plant medicine ayahuasca, and his dream of bringing ayahuasca down here into the Valley. So if you're interested in those, come back and listen in. And of course, the videos will be available here on the page for you to tune in if you're not able to tune in live. So thank you so much for being here with me. Again, my name is Janie Santoy of Sybil Now, which is Create Your Best Life Now. And I'm committed to bringing you a discussion of different tools that can help you on your journey. So thank you again for tuning in, and I hope to interact with you soon in real life sometime soon. Thanks.